Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel and I hope you're doing well. Today I wanted to begin a new series on the channel where I take a closer look at the different cards that are available for you to play in the Make Your Own card game. And in episode 1 I'm going to be taking a look at the Delta Warriors. The Delta Warriors are a group of teenagers with elemental superpowers who attend the prestigious Delta Academy together. And together they use their elemental powers to save their hometown of Delta City from evildoers. As far as their relation to this card game is concerned, this is one of the earliest archetypes I've made for the game. They actually date back to the very first season of Make Your Own, which was released back in 2007. Now, they weren't initially created back in 2007. They were added when a later feature was added to the season 1 version of the game, which was elemental attributes. And so I wanted a series of characters to have the different access to the different elements in the game. And that's how the Delta Warriors were basically born. And they have been in the game ever since. And today, that's who we're going to look at, starting with Delta Warrior Boldor here. He is a 7-cost hero with 7 attack, 5 defense, and an ability called Great Quake, which for 5 power allows you to, for your attack this turn, attack all opposing characters with this character. And any character that's not knocked out cannot attack during your opponent's next turn. So it's a very powerful effect if you can get it off. It does take a lot of cost to get it going, though. But yeah, Boulder is one of 7 characters who was in the Make Your Own card game pretty much since the beginning when he was, since the first iteration of the game since he was introduced. And so I kind of have them here in order. So the next character on the list is Delta Warrior Shadra, who is a 6-cost hero with 7 attack, 4 defense. And he has a 4-power ability called Shadow Darts, which says your opponent loses 1 life for each card your opponent has in their hand. You can use this ability once per turn, but if you use this ability, you skip your combat step. So, in exchange for not having your combat step, you basically get to do free damage without having to worry about what's on your opponent's board. Although you do now have to worry about what cards your opponent has in hand when you're using that. Next is Delta Warrior Hydro, which has water type powers. He's a 6-cost hero with 6 attack, 4 defense, and his Aqua attack, which allows you to, until end of turn, perform a direct attack. It's only 2 powers, so it's a pretty cheap ability to use over and over again. If you just want to get that chip damage in there, he can get it done for you. Next is Pyro. He's a 5-cost hero with 5 attack, 4 defense, and an interesting ability called Burst Attack. To use his Burst Attack, you have to first knock him out, but in exchange, you get to choose one of your opponent's characters and KO it. It's a pretty nice ability to have a character who can attack for a turn, and then if you want to replace him with something else, you can just use his ability to knock out something on the board and get him off the field in the process to put something else down. Next, there's Arrow, a 3-cost hero, so she's one of the cheaper characters in the game. A 3-cost hero with 3 attack, 2 defense, and some interesting abilities. The first is Evasive, which is a keyword ability which states that she can only be attacked by characters that have the evasive ability, so it kind of protects her in a way, at least from combat. Her second ability, Hurricane, costs 3 power and allows you to once per turn return a character to its owner's hand. This can be either yours or your opponent's, so that's a pretty useful ability, if I do say so myself. Next is probably one of my favorite of the Delta Warriors. It's Flora Sky, who is also a 3-cost hero with 2 attack, 4 defense, so pretty decent stats for the cost. And 2 good abilities. The first, Restoration, is an automatic ability which allows you to gain 1 life between turns. And her growth cycle ability, which for 2 power allows you to once per turn discard a card from your hand and draw a card. So it's a pretty good draw engine if you're using the Delta Warriors. Definitely one of the better ones to have in your deck. The last of the original 7 Delta Warriors is Lumia, who is a light-based hero. She's a 2-cost, 1 attack, 4 defense, so again, pretty good stats for the cost. And with 2 abilities, both of which cost 2 power. Her first, Healing Light, allows you to gain 2 life, and her second allows you to, once per turn, look at your opponent's hand. So it can be pretty useful in the early stages of the game, especially. And that's it for like the first 7, but there's definitely more to show, so stay tuned. Next is Delta Warrior Maxim, who as I've said, is the most powerful of the Delta Warriors. He's also one who's graduated from the academy, but he still helps out his fellow friends from time to time whenever there's a great danger afoot in Delta City. As far as his card goes, he's a 10-cost hero with 10 attack, 10 defense. He has the ward keyword, which means opponents cannot choose him except when they're attacking him. So if they have an action that targets it, they can't choose him. His first ability, Delta Strike, allows him to gain extra attack for not only each hero, but also for each Delta Warrior you have in play. There are also heroes that don't have the Delta Warrior in their names. If you have 4 Delta, it doesn't count him, but if you have 4 other Delta Warriors when he's in play, he gets plus 8 attack, which brings him up to 18 attack, which is the highest in the game without any other boosts. And that's pretty impressive. I don't know if he was in the initial season of Make Your Owns, though. He might have, and this is kind of brings me to a point where I don't have the original cards from that first season. So a lot of what I remember about the earliest version of the game is kind of from memory. And so I remember like these 7 here were in the game, I know, but not sure about him. But he might have been, considering the first version was a lot like Yu-Gi-Oh in a way, in certain ways, where you had like tribute summoning, where you basically take a number of characters on your field and discard them to bring in a bigger character from the field. And I think he might have been like the payoff for that, for having a bunch of Delta Warriors in play. You just tribute a bunch of them and then you could bring him out. But I don't have the original card, so I don't quite remember perfectly. But fortunately now we get into the Delta Warriors, who I know were introduced in the second season. The one that closely resembles the version that is available on Untap for you to play. So next we have Delta Warrior Akai, who is actually the senior member of the Delta Warriors, aside from Maxim here. Akai is a 7-cost hero with 7 attack, 7 defense, and it has a really good ability in leadership. So, which states that whenever a hero enters play from your hand, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on him, which would give that character 1 attack and 1 extra defense, which is already pretty good if you are running a pure hero deck. But if the character you play happens to also have Delta Warrior in its name, you get to draw a card. So he'll keep your hand full, also powering up your heroes. It's a very good card to have if you're running a Delta Warrior deck. You'll definitely want him in there. Next is Monty here. He's an 8-cost hero, 4 attack, 12 defense. So his defense is pretty high, but he has an interesting ability in Girthquake, which for 3 power allows you to, once per turn, switch his attack and defense around until the end of your opponent's next turn. So he can become a pretty powerful attacker, but at the cost of being relatively easy to destroy when your opponent's turn comes around. And at 8 cost, if your opponent also has some high cost cards that are at least 8, they're probably going to have something that has much higher attack than 4. Next is Delta Warrior Freya, who has ice powers, and she's a 4-cost hero, 2 attack, 5 defense. And her ability, Cold Wave, costs 2 power and sets once per turn. You choose one of your opponent's characters, and that character cannot attack during your opponent's next turn. So it's pretty nice to help out her fellow warriors, and can stop a problematic character from attacking if you can keep her on the board and keep paying this turn after turn. It's pretty good in that sense. And here's another one of my favorites. It's Delta Warrior Raylan, who is a 4-cost hero, 4 attack, 3 defense, and a pretty good ability that when you play him from your hand, your opponent chooses and discards 1 card from their hand. And based on the card they discarded, they lose life points equal to that card's cost. So it's a great way to get in some extra chip damage if you're playing some kind of aggro-based deck with the Delta Warriors, which is definitely geared more toward that than other kinds of strategies. Next, we have somewhat of a searcher for the Delta Warriors. It's Gale, and I really like the swirl in the background here. It's just some curved colored pencil lines, but I really like how this turned out. As for Gale himself, he's a 2-cost hero, 2 attack, 2 defense, and his team attacks states that when you play him from your hand, you look at the top 4 cards of your deck, and you get to reveal a hero character or a character with Delta Warrior in its name and add it to your hand. The rest of the cards get shuffled into the deck, but this can be a pretty good way of getting Delta Warriors out. But there is another card that I will show that is even better for that, so stay tuned for that. Next is Blitz, who is the 1-cost Delta Warrior hero. 2 attack, 0 defense, so definitely the lowest defense of any of the Delta Warriors, but he has a pretty useful keyword ability in critical. When he attacks opposing character, you just get to destroy it. Doesn't matter what their defense is, you can just use him, take out a problematic character that you have to deal with, and then he may get knocked out in the process, but if he takes out something that you're having trouble dealing with any other way, he did his job. The last of the Delta Warriors is Misfortune. She's a 5-cost hero with 4 attack, 4 defense, and her Wicked Gaze ability, which states, as long as this character is in play, the other characters in play in each player's hand and in each player's discard pile have no abilities. Now, if you notice, all the Delta Warriors have abilities, so if you play them with her, she kind of turns these off, which can be kind of bad for you. So she doesn't quite work as well with the other Delta Warriors, but that might tell you a little something about her character. Now, that is it for the Delta Warriors, but there's a couple other cards I want to show you. And of course, behind every team of heroes, there has to be a villain, and we've got one here in Zemos. He's a 5-cost, 5 attack, 3 defense villain, and he's Delta City's most wanted criminal, and his elemental powers make him a formidable adversary. His ability is pretty cool, which is Call Underling. When you play him, you search your deck for a character of power cost 3 or less and put it directly into play. Not just your hand, but in play. Then shuffle your deck, so you get to play 2 characters at once with him, which is pretty neat. And he can actually get some of these Delta Warriors, ironically enough. You can get Gale here, for example. You can get Flora Sky, so it's kind of interesting that a character who opposes the Delta Warriors actually can work well with some of them in some ways. I've also got some action cards I want to show off here. And the first of these is called the Heroes, which is the support card for the Delta Warriors that I mentioned earlier. This is a 4-cost normal action that states you can search your deck for up to 2 hero characters, reveal them, add them to your hand, then shuffle your deck. It's pretty powerful for the cost, even though it can only grab hero characters. Still very useful. The last 2 I've got are characters that feature some of these characters in the art, but aren't necessarily that don't necessarily synchronize with the archetype, but they do feature the characters in the art. And we've got Truce here, which has Kai and Zemo shaking hands, although they're kind of reluctant about it. And this is a pretty useful card that states that neither player may attack until the end of your opponent's next turn. So if you need to stall for a bit, this can help you out for a turn. And the final of these cards is Burst Attack, which features Pyro executing a fiery blast against some opponents here. This is a card that states you choose one of your opponent's characters and KO it, and then draw a card. Now, I wasn't quite thinking when I was doing this. Originally, this card costed 3 and just said choose one of your opponent's characters and KO it. It didn't have any other abilities or anything. But since I already had a card that did the same thing and had the same cost, I wanted to differentiate this from the other one. In hindsight, I probably could have done something a bit more fitting with the extra upside. Like I could have maybe caused the card to also do some damage to the opponent's life. Potentially, it would have been a bit more fitting, but I ended up going with draw a card. But yeah, that's Burst Attack, and that's all the cards I wanted to show in this video. That's 19 of them, so quite a few there, and I hope to show more of them. And definitely let me know in the comments what your favorite card was in this showcase. And if you enjoyed this kind of video, be sure to leave a like, and definitely stay tuned to the channel for more card showcases like these. And I will see you next time. Take care.